Welcome to the 2022 Benefit Communications Report webinar. I'm super excited to be hosting today's webinar, and joining me is Susan Baier from Audience Audit. They helped us conduct the research last fall. In today's webinar, we're going to look at some of the data and discuss some of our initial insights. But before we dive in, a little background. I'm Guy Westermeyer, the president and owner of Westcomm. Prior to starting Westcomm in 2001, I worked for Ford Motor Company, and our goal has always been to figure out ways to partner with our customers to most effectively achieve their goals. And from the beginning, we've always been looking for creative ways to address employee communication challenges. And about 15 years ago, that evolved into helping HR departments and benefit teams look at ways to improve communications around benefits. Westcomm's headquartered in Indianapolis, and we also have an office in Detroit. Our team is made up of 20 people, all with years of experience in communications, serving a variety of industries. We have clients across sectors. We have clients with both global and national footprints. Susan, why don't you go ahead and take a second and introduce yourself and Audience Audit?
Sure, Guy. Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Baier. I run a research organization called Audience Audit. We work with agencies like Westcomm to develop insights into audiences.
So, why did we embark on this study? Well, our team has a massive passion around this topic, the topic of employee benefit communications. We believe that if employees can better understand their benefits, they will not only maybe live healthier lives, hopefully, and have more prosperous lives, but we also know that those employees become better employees for you as an employer. And that companies spend a lot of money on benefits, and that by employees maybe understanding them, they get better utilization and they see the value. And we all know that retention, recruiting is a hot topic right now. So using your benefits as a recruiting and retention strategy is kind of key. But we also know a lot of organizations struggle with this, right? Because you typically fall into the trap of writing a lot of jargon and complex information. So we like to come alongside organizations and help them try to break that down and make the communication about benefits much more relatable. So that's why we embarked on this. So let's dive in and take a look at what we saw.
Thanks, guys. So this was a 15-minute online survey. We developed a custom survey for you all. It was fielded in August and September of 2021. We had folks from around the country. And the study overall has a plus or minus 8-point margin of error at 95% confidence. So it's a good, strong study of folks that are engaged in benefits communications. You can see some information here. As you can see, lots of involvement in the benefits communications roles, whether they are distributing employee materials, creating them, determining the strategy for communications. Most of these folks are working in HR plus a smattering of other things. Age distributed sort of across the spectrum. A lot of our respondents are director level or below, and as you can see, we've got a lot of experience in benefits. Very few of these folks have been working in benefits for less than 5 years. So a nice diverse group of people who are really involved, Guy, in the decisions around benefit communications and creating those communications and distributing them. We also see a lot of benefits supported by these folks. Medical insurance is at the top here, 92%, but you can see very common benefits, retirement plans, dental insurance, prescription and vision coverage. Some of the things that are less common are voluntary benefits like accident insurance or hospital indemnity, family-friendly benefits like adoption or child care assistance, and HRAs are offered by 28% of the organizations that our respondents represent.
Yeah, and what we saw really, when we looked at that, it wasn't that shocking that the benefit package across the segments, which we're going to get into next, really wasn't that different. And if you take a look at the report, we literally made a pretty small footnote of the benefit package in that because there just wasn't much variation across the board with what benefits were offered.
So one of the things that we really focused on in this research was sort of a different way of looking at this particular audience. You know, a lot of research around this kind of thing will focus on how big these organizations are, or maybe the title or role of the respondent that we have. We wanted to go a little bit deeper and understand how these folks who are really armpit deep in employee communications efforts feel about that effort and feel about the importance of those communications and how their organizations are doing with respect to those. So in our survey, we created a set of attitudes that everybody had to rate in terms of the extent to which they agree or disagree with those. And that data went into analysis and basically revealed segments within this community that were not predetermined, but that sort of showed up in the data that we got from our respondents. And it really sort of illustrates the landscape of folks out there, the professionals doing this this kind of work, Guy. We saw three very distinct attitudinal segments. We're going to talk about them in detail. But each of these represent a group of people that hold a set of perspectives together in common. They link them whether they realize that they do or not. So we have accomplished. You'll always see these folks in blue. They represent 31% of our respondent group. Struggling is 29% in orange, and aspiring 40% in red. So let's dive in and take a look at the differences between these three really different types of professionals doing this work.
It's been really fun to take some of the early data and share it with our existing clients and have conversations with them about kind of these three segments and hear them ponder where were they, because a majority of our clients did respond to this survey in addition to others in the field, but they had a lot of fun kind of plotting themselves and looking at the questions and kind of trying to figure out maybe where they fell in the spectrum of these three groups.
Yeah, and hopefully not feel alone, regardless of where they ended up, because we've got folks across this spectrum from all over the country. So chances are, if you're watching and you're in one of these groups, which you should be, don't feel alone. You've got company. So let's talk about the accomplished first, Guy. I just want to show everybody what we're looking at here. So for each of these segments, this down here on the left is the set of attitudes that define these folks. And one of the things that Guy is making available to all of you is an interactive visualization of this data that you can look at, just like we're going to look at it today, and sort of dig in a little bit more. But this is the set of attitudes which are connected for the folks in this particular segment. The rating scale we gave them was a disagree completely, which is a 1, agree completely, which is a 6, and this midline here represents the line between agreement and disagreement. What you're seeing on the right side is the average rating for each of the segments. You can see I've highlighted the accomplished here, but you can see the ratings for the other segments sort of faded out behind. So you're getting two pieces of information here. First of all, what are the attitudes that are connecting this particular group of people that make them really different from everyone else? And what is the extent to which they agree with each of these attitudes, which, as you can see, in a lot of cases, they agree much more than everybody else as well. So sort of two different pieces of information. So when we look at the accomplished, which you see represented here in blue, these folks are feeling really good about their organization, about their role, about the appreciation of their organization and the employees as to the role that they play in terms of benefits communications. They feel like they have the time and resources to do their job well, and they feel well supported by providers, guys. So they say their organization has a well-designed benefits program, and their staff is able to answer most employee questions about benefits programs, which is important, as we'll see later, in the minds of these professionals. They have the time to understand their offerings well. They enjoy their responsibilities related to benefits. They have the experience and knowledge they need to conduct their communications activities well. They say their time is mostly spent on important and valuable activities for their organization. They have the resources that they need. They have the expertise in-house to develop effective employee communications. They say they value their benefits providers, and the expertise of the HR staff is valued by their employees. They say providers do a good job of helping us understand their programs so that they can answer employee questions. They say their benefits communication program is engaging. It's based on a specific strategy that they have in place for handling these types of communications. These folks feel appreciated and valued for their HR related activities, not just benefits communications activities. They also say that it's better to give employees more information than they need to avoid complaints later. And then a lot of good news about their benefits providers. So they say they typically are providing good communication resources for employees. The providers are supporting them well, and the providers understand the needs of their organization. You can see we see some pretty strong levels of agreement here in this group compared to some of our other folks. So it's pretty clear, guys, we're going to see these folks are feeling pretty solid about how things are going and about their satisfaction with their jobs. Not everybody feels the same, as we will see in a minute.
Yeah, what we see with the accomplished group, and when we think about those clients that we have that are in that space, um, the communication aspect of benefits is really a non-negotiable, right? You have to take a serious strategy to them, and you have to take a serious approach to figuring out ways to break down the information and be useful to the employees, and also not just be useful, but also listen and have a way to get information back on how is the material being received, and are there questions, and these organizations are looking at those questions that come in from employees to pivot and adapt the strategy
Hmm,
as we go.
for sure. So let's look at our second group. And just as a reminder, those accomplished are 31%. So that's just under a third that are really feeling like everything's going really well, Guy. This second group, struggling, is 29% of our respondents. And these folks feel very differently than the other folks in the survey. Struggling folks feel that their organization should be doing more for employees, that providers should be more helpful, and they also don't feel very satisfied with their particular role and sort of the appreciation that they're given for the hard work that they're doing. This group believes that changes due to the COVID pandemic have had a big impact on their work and made it much more challenging. They think their organization would help from having some outside expertise when it comes to employee benefits communications, and should be doing more in terms of the benefits that are available to employees. They say their job would be easier if their organization did a better job with employee benefits communications. They get questions about benefits, and they typically refer them to benefits providers. They're worried about the impact of regulations on their ability to manage employee benefits programs on their own. They say their employees struggle with the language that the organization is using in terms of benefits communications. They claim their organization is more focused on the cost of providing benefits than on ensuring that employees actually understand and engage with those benefits programs. They say working in HR is a thankless job, and you can see this is the only group in the study that says that that is true. Everybody else disagrees with that fairly strongly. They say benefits providers treat them like a number. Employees are often confused about their eligibility for benefits. They think, Guy, that their organization has unrealistic expectations about what their HR staff can accomplish in terms of employee benefits communication, sort of some frustration there with their organization. They worry that benefits are going to be reduced in the wake of the pandemic for employees. They say their organization regularly switches providers to save money, and that their benefits programs change too fast to allow the staff to understand them well, and try to help employees understand them as well, which is, again, something that's a big difference between this group. So really, Guy, a lot of frustration with sort of their job and what they're being asked to do, frustration with their organization in terms of what it's expecting them to be able to do, especially in light of sort of constant shifting of providers for cost benefits. And then some frustration with providers too, in terms of just sort of not being given the types of support that they would like to see.
Yeah, as a team, as we digested the different segments, we definitely could again point out some individuals we've worked with that probably fit into the struggling category, and frequently what the the experience that we would have with those individuals was that they were relying heavily on provider uh, information, whether that be from their dental provider or their medical or their vision. And one of the challenges there that we see is employees don't identify with the medical insurance provider. They identify with you, the employer.
Mm.
And when you just take that information directly from the provider, it A doesn't sound like you as an organization, it doesn't look like you as an organization, and there becomes a disconnect.
Mm.
Um, and when we've engaged with individuals or companies and organizations that are kind of in that struggling category, a lot of times, unlike, say, one of the other two categories, the aspiring or the accomplishing, they really are kind of straight to the point of, I need a postcard, or I need a this, or I need a that, versus having that larger conversation about the strategy and saying,
Yeah.
here's what we're trying to drive. How should we do this? They struggle to really engage with the communication vendor or a communication agency in a way that allows the agency to do the most for their budget.
Yeah. It seems to me too that it might be possible that the organization that these people work for may not think of themselves as struggling with respect to benefits communications. They may not be sort of seeing some of the frustration that's happening because they're focused on reducing the cost of benefits, reducing the cost of communications, and sort of that is their effort. I just wonder if you guys have seen situations like that where maybe the folks working on these efforts are pretty frustrated, and the organization leadership hasn't really sort of gotten wind of that or internalized that.
For sure. We've had that situation where they're frustrated, and then we've also had the situation where they maybe don't see that they're struggling, right? They think that they're doing a great job when maybe there's a way to pivot, um, and step up the game, so to speak,
Yeah.
of the communication to help the employees understand better. Because one of the challenges we see with uh, this work is if an HR professional is heavily directing the content, the HR professional knows this inside and out, right? They're the expert. We have to jump in and try to break that down and say the employee is not the expert. So we have to write this in a different way or talk about it in a different way to help them understand. So that's kind of for us, that's the exciting challenge, is going, how do we make this content relevant so that the employee understands it and take it out of that jargon.
For sure. Well, it's certainly a challenge that this particular group understands well, because they complain about that in terms of the language that's being used in the communications. Let's look at the aspiring. So this is aspiring is our largest group, 40%. These folks definitely aren't as accomplished as the first segment would claim to be, but they have a pretty strong belief system in the value of good benefits communications, Guy. You can see they say they're the most likely to agree, and look at the strong agreement with all of these statements, that employees care a lot about the benefits that are available to them, that the best communications programs encourage two-way communications between employees and HR staff, that they engage with employees year-round, not just at open enrollment time, that these programs, the best of them, distribute information in a range of ways. So whether that's sort of a combination of printed and email and video information, they think that's critically important. And they say it's important to provide communications in multiple ways if you want employees to engage with them. So it's not just about pumping stuff out, but it's about really sort of finding the best ways for each individual employee to engage with and consume the information that they need. Getting employees engaged in their benefits options is important for retaining high quality employees. It's important for the organization's financial health. Changes due to the COVID pandemic, have made their work more important than ever, and that the best programs personalize information for each employee based on their eligibility or the benefits that they have selected, demographic information, etc. So these folks have some pretty high standards for what a communications program should look like, but they also associate the value of those benefits and their communications with not just sort of employee retention, but also with the financial health of the organization.
Yeah, what we see with this group, and this is a fun challenge, they are constantly pushing us.
Hmm.
They are constantly pushing us to evolve the communication solutions and think of different ideas and solutions to bring to the table. Um, I didn't talk about this in the intro, but like part of our business is we also help organizations with marketing challenges. And we often talk about we use a lot of the same strategies and thought processes with employees. Yeah, we're not marketing to them, but we're trying to make sure they get the message, they understand the message. So in a way, it is marketing. It's just marketing to an internal audience. So we'll frequently start to bleed across marketing strategies and new ideas and new uh, innovative ways to communicate and bring that in. And this group, this aspiring group, is hungry for that. They don't want the status quo. You can't say, well, this is what we did last year, so we're just going to do the same thing. They want that continually evolving strategy to kind of continue to move. The idea, I guess, is that they're going to maybe move into the accomplished, but I think some of those in the aspiring may already be in the accomplished, but their attitude is they're never satisfied.
More, yeah, I wondered about that because when you look at this particular group compared to the accomplished, they're not as likely to say we've got everything we need and everything's perfect. And some of that may just be because their bar is set so high, huh?
Yeah, I think I can think of situations with clients where, we get emails sent to us with other ideas of things they've seen, and it's that whole, like I said, it's that whole evolution, continual development of ideas
Yeah.
and ways to solve what we're trying to solve here.
Yeah, and that's our largest group, 40%. So that's kind of exciting that there are folks out there, so many of them, who are really trying to build something engaging and relevant for the benefit of their organization. We have this big list of attitudes, and there are often attitudes that don't end up defining a particular group by being sort of linked to others. We call those non-defining attitudes, and we did find some in this study. Most of them everybody agrees with at very comparable levels. So, for example, employees should quickly be able to get answers to their benefits questions from someone in my organization. And this is interesting because one of the things that the struggling folks said was we pretty much outsource that to the providers. We don't have the information we need, so we pretty much refer folks to the providers. But they believe that they should be able to answer those kinds of things in-house, so no wonder their frustration with that particular point. Also, lots of agreement that having well-designed and engaging communications creates a return on investment for the organization. So a lot of acceptance about that concept that good benefits communications actually generates an ROI for the organization. Most moderate agreement that their organization typically stays with key benefits providers. We know that the struggling claims that things change around a lot. So they're less likely to strongly agree with this statement than the other two segments are, but on average, they're about in the same place. And that employee benefits communications should be expected to generate a return on investment. Again, aligned with this one, they do, so they should be expected to do that. And then this one, big difference here. Our employees are often confused about the benefits available to them. The accomplished strongly disagree with that statement at a 2.2. Aspiring are sort of at the midline, and struggling agree to some extent that their communications actually often leave employees feeling confused.
Yeah, these non-defining attributes didn't shock us that much.
Mm-hmm.
Often when we begin an engagement with a client, um, we'll cite kind of what we see as many of the challenges, in the industry or in their field. And we often will have clients, kind of say, "Hey, have you been bugging our conference room or somehow reading our email? How do you know?" That's us. And, really what we see is every organization is unique, of course, and every situation is a little different, and everybody has slightly different nuances and variations, but really across the size spectrum and industry spectrum, all these groups are really facing very similar challenges, right? I mean, so to see that they all kind of weighted on these, as you call them, non-defining attributes the way they did wasn't too much of a shock because, in the end, the benefit teams, I mean, they want to help their employees, right? I mean, they want to make communications a priority, but the challenge they run into is how are they going to do that? Who's going to help? Because
Yep.
one of our viewpoints is that, and it's found and it's backed up by data from other surveys and other studies, is that employees don't understand this content. So who's going to help them understand it? Well, if an organization goes to their corporate communications or internal communications team, if they have a generalist that's really focused on more external communication, why would we expect them to become benefit experts? Or how would we expect them to become benefit experts and be able to break this down? So, um, it's just one of the things where we've been able to come in and help just based on the background of the team.
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point, it was really interesting to see that these very different perspectives weren't associated with sort of like the big companies all being in the accomplished group and the littler guys in the struggling group. We didn't really see that, or that it was about like level. Like it wasn't that the directors thought everything was great and the people working in the trenches thought it was about. We saw folks distributed sort of across the spectrum. So anybody, any organization can really be in any of these groups, regardless of their size or the type of budget that they allocate to this work.
Yep, completely agree.
So let's talk about new challenges in a changing workplace. One of the things we asked about was the kinds of things that organizations are struggling with. And I'm sure, as you said, you guys do this work all the time. So I'm sure this list isn't terribly surprising to you. But a lot of folks saying that keeping employee healthcare costs down and keeping having employees fully understand their benefits were key. Retaining top talent also very prominent. There's just a whole bunch of stuff here on the list that these folks say their organizations are struggling to accomplish.
The other interesting thing, and I know we didn't include it in today's deck, but was that we asked what they saw as a struggle or a challenge projecting 2 years out, which I know if we think about the last 2 years, thinking 2 years out, you know, who knows where things will be, right? But in reality, those results really weren't that different than what we saw here. So, um, which I guess wasn't that shocking, really, if you think about what's in the immediate is still kind of what people are seeing
Yeah,
further.
costs keep going up. Like, yep, the preventative care gets more expensive. A lot of those things that it looks like they're working on now and plan to have to keep working on for a while, for sure. So these are the overall results. But and I mentioned that you guys all have access to the interactive visualization of this data, which is going to allow you to break it down. This is everybody in the survey. You can see that on the view selector. But when we look at it by segment, we can sort of see some differences between the segments in terms of challenges. So when it comes to accomplished, one of the things that's interesting is the extent to which they cite many of these challenges less often than the other segments do. The ones that are big concerns to them are keeping employee healthcare costs down, um, retaining top talent, and keeping the healthcare costs down for the employer. So those are their biggest concerns as a segment relative to some of the other things that they're less likely to cite.
What was surprising to us on this was that they were less concerned about personalization or using data to communicate. And we kind of wonder as we hypothesize why that might have been, it might be because they already are using that
Yeah.
data. So they might be saying, hey, we don't have that as a concern because we're already doing it.
Yeah. Could be for sure. Certainly, they claim, they have less concern about reducing employee confusion, and that one of the attitudes they had was that they're doing a very good job of making their employee communications relevant, understandable, sort of easy for employees to engage with. On the struggling side of the house, again, we see some higher levels of struggles in some areas. They're big ones. Again, we see keeping the cost down for employees and helping them fully understand their benefits. They were more likely to cite needing to personalize communications for each employee as a challenge. So maybe something they're not doing and they're struggling to accomplish.
Yeah, and in this group, we were a little shocked that they were less worried about retaining talent. But I kind of think that might be because they have some more fundamental things that they're worried about
Hmm.
uh, and focused on, right? I mean,
Hmm.
you can only focus on so many things at one time, right?
Yep.
So maybe they're focused on some of those things like helping employees understand and the cost first, and then the retaining talent is, kind of maybe lower on that list.
Yep, a little less about keeping their employer healthcare costs down too. So as you said, sort of it's all about how many priorities you can handle at a time. In terms of the aspiring, they cite a lot of challenges, and maybe it's because of this sort of relentless, as you talk about, sort of relentless continuous improvement program on their own. So it looks like they are citing and probably trying to tackle a lot of challenges at the same time. They're less concerned about keeping healthcare costs down for employees and more concerned about helping employees fully understand their benefits, retaining top talent, increasing utilization of preventative care, reducing employee confusion, improving benefits onboarding for new hires. They have a lot of big goals, this group.
Yeah, and you kind of said something a little earlier, right? Like controlling costs is a big concern that we hear across the board with clients. The cost of healthcare, as we all know, continues to go up. But what was interesting with this group is that I believe, right, if I'm looking at that right, reducing confusion
Hmm.
ranked higher
Yes,
than controlling costs,
a
right? And it
lot of
goes back to what we talked about earlier that this group may have already accomplished some things, but they are just driving to deliver.
Yep. For new hires as well as sort of existing employees, they have a lot of work that they're trying to accomplish, including measurement. Sort of these 2 points about understanding which aspects of communication are working well and which aren't, and measuring engagement and effectiveness of their program is pretty high on their list. In the folks that you identified as aspiring, sort of the ability to monitor and measure a critical component.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely, I would say the aspiring that if I think through the client list that we have and those that I think fit into that category, they do want to know what's working. They do want to know what questions are coming in so they can pivot the strategy. The metrics part, and I know in the survey we asked some additional detailed questions about what people thought. And, you'll be able to, again, like Susan said, go in and look at all the data on the landing page. But what was interesting is how much this industry kind of struggles with that metric and what maybe we think is a good metric to use versus what others might think is a metric to use, right? Just open rates isn't really a great metric. Open rates of an email or video views. It's more of trying to measure understanding and usage and correct usage, I guess, would even be more challenging
Yeah,
to
more
measure.
complex than just clicks.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Well, certainly an interest of this group in particular.
So as we, just were talking about the full visualization of the research is on our website, and you can, like I said, you can spend days, well, maybe not days, but hours clicking through and diving in, and you can get yourself into some rabbit holes for sure as we were digesting all the data. But there's also an executive summary out there that you can download. But really, going back to the very beginning of why we care, why we do this, right? And it's this belief. and that elevating your it's this belief that elevating your employee and benefit communications really does have an impact on your organization. It can, help create healthier employees. It can improve your retention. It helps create kind of a caring culture and the perceived value by employees, and ultimately better utilization of the benefits that your organization's already paying for. So this brings us to the close of the webinar. The data we've gone through today kind of is the scratching of the surface. If you want to dive into the full data set, you can go to the website and walk yourself through the visualization, or you can download the executive summary. Uh, Over the months to come, we'll be sending out some additional resources based on what we found. I hope you found this webinar helpful, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We're always excited to chat about this topic and share insights.